Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive into UPSC Current Affairs. You know how we do it? It's a daily thing. We're tackling part one of the 9th of February 2025 news today. So grab your notes, your highlighters, whatever you need, and let's get right into it. Some of these topics might feel like a quick recap. Others, well, they'll be brand new, fresh off the press. But hey, listen, every single piece of info you pick up could be the key to cracking those exams. So hit that like button, subscribe, and let's dive in.
All right, sounds good. Ready when you are.
Okay, first up, we're heading to the Northeast, where there's a really cool program launching the Swavalambini Programme. It's a collaboration between the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and NETI Ayog. What's interesting here is that it's super focused. They're specifically working with female students in higher education institutions. We're talking Assam, Meghalaya, and Mizoram. Why do you think they're zeroing in on this specific group and region?
Well, I think it's a strategic move. It tackles two really important things at once. First, empowering women, which is, essential for any kind of development. And second, it boosts the Northeast's entrepreneurial scene, which honestly hasn't gotten the attention it deserves.
Right, it's like a double whammy of positive change. And it's not just about throwing money at the problem. They've got a solid plan. The program kicks off with something called the Entrepreneurship Awareness Program, or EAP for short. It's like a crash course, getting 600 students familiar with the basics of starting a business. From there, they choose 300 of those students to move on to the Women Entrepreneurship Development Program, or EDP. This is where things get intense. They get in-depth training on everything from finance and marketing to legal stuff. But honestly, the best part is what comes after the training.
Yeah, that mentorship, right?
Exactly. They get 6 months of mentorship and support. That's huge. That's what turns a good idea into a successful, sustainable business,
Totally. It's about giving them that safety net, that guidance, so they can actually navigate the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. This kind of hands-on approach, it could be a game changer, not just for those women, but for the whole region's economy.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second. There's a term that's been popping up in the news, and it's not exactly a happy one, donkey route. It's come up because of all the deportations happening, Indians being sent back from the U.S. after trying to get there through, well, this donkey route. Can you break down what it actually means?
Sure. So the term itself, it comes from a Punjabi idiom, basically meaning a journey that's long, unplanned, and just plain tough. But when we're talking about migration, it takes on a whole other meaning. We're talking about the routes illegal migrants take, and it's dangerous,
Yeah.
Multiple border crossings, rough terrain, and these people end up relying on agents and traffickers who exploit them. It's not a good situation.
It's more than just a physical challenge? Then it's a whole web of risk and danger.
Yeah.
And we're talking about some crazy complicated routes too. Like some people get a Schengen area visa, which lets them travel across 26 European countries, and then they try to sneak into the UK from there.
Yeah, it's a huge gamble, a desperate one. Driven by, I guess, a mix of hope and desperation, right? These deportations, though, they're a harsh wake-up call. The reality is this route, it's full of danger, and it often ends in heartbreak.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's move on to something a little more positive, though. Something that's super important, especially in India. We're talking about the National Commission for Safai Karamcharis, or NCSK. The Union Cabinet just gave them an extension, another 3 years to keep doing what they do. What exactly is their role, and why is this extension so important?
The NCSK, they're the ones looking out for our Safai Karamcharis, the people who keep our cities clean. They investigate their working conditions, they suggest programs to help them, and maybe most importantly, they make sure that the law against manual scavenging, that's the 2013 Prohibition of Employment as Manual Scavengers and their Rehabilitation Act, for those taking notes, they make sure that law is actually being followed.
Given how dangerous sanitation work can be, having someone looking out for these workers is essential, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And something that a lot of people don't know, they're the only ones in the whole country who actually keep track of how many people die in sewers. It's grim, but that data is so important. It shows us how dangerous this work is and helps push for safer conditions. This extension means they can keep doing that, keep fighting for these essential workers.
All right, let's talk about something that's got everyone buzzing, especially in the world of traditional medicine, the Shatavari plant. Or if you want to get all fancy, asparagus erasemosus, the Ministry of Ayush has gone all out with a campaign, Shatavari for better health. They're even calling it the Queen of Herbs. What's all the hype about?
Well, Shatavari has got a long history in Ayurveda. It's known for being beneficial, especially for women's health. Ancient texts like the Charak Samhita and Ashtang Hridyam, they talk about using it to treat all sorts of female health problems. It's a tonic. It helps with, getting rid of excess fluids. And it's even a galactagogue, which means it helps with milk production. That's why it's often recommended for breastfeeding mothers.
So that's the connection to women's health.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And I've heard there's even some research suggesting it could be helpful for gastric ulcers, too.
Right.
Pretty versatile, huh?
Yeah, definitely. The campaign is all about raising awareness about these potential benefits, bringing this ancient remedy back into the spotlight. But it's important to remember that while it shows promise, we need more research to be sure it really works and to figure out the right dosages and all that.
Good point. Always good to be cautious. Okay, shifting gears again. This time we're talking about a story that's got the conservation folks pretty riled up. The Karnataka government has decided to open up the Bhimgad Wildlife Sanctuary, BWS for short, for wildlife safaris, and, well, the environmentalists aren't happy. Can you give us the lowdown on this?
Sure. So the BWS, it's in the Western Ghats, which, as you know, is a biodiversity hotspot. It's actually a pretty new sanctuary established in 2011, and it's home to some amazing species, including some that are endangered, like the Roten's free-tailed bat. Their only known breeding spot is in these caves, the Barapede Caves, right in the sanctuary.
So a new sanctuary with a really unique ecosystem.
Yep.
I can definitely see why the environmentalists are worried.
Yeah. Their argument is that introducing tourism, even if it's controlled safaris, could mess things up, It could damage the habitat, lead to more conflict between humans and animals, and even harm those sensitive species. It raises a big question. Can we really have tourism and conservation together in a place this fragile?
It's a tough question for sure. It makes you think about the long-term impact,
It definitely does. It's a balancing act, finding a way for people to experience these amazing places without destroying them. Speaking of delicate balances, let's talk about Tropex 25. It's this huge naval exercise, theater-level operational exercise to be exact, that the Indian Navy's got going on right now in the Indian Ocean region. This isn't just some routine drill. It's a statement,
Yeah.
a display of strength and how prepared they are.
It sounds pretty intense and complex. So much going on. What are some of the key things that, UPSC aspirants should take away from this?
Okay, so first off, it shows just how much India's naval power has grown. And it shows they're serious about having a strong presence in the Indian Ocean region. That's huge strategically. Second, it highlights how important it is for different parts of the military to work together, The Army, the Air Force, the Coast Guard. They're all in on this. That's key for facing any kind of threat these days, especially the more complicated ones. And finally, it's a reminder of what India's priorities are strategically and how their role in the global maritime scene is changing. It's a big deal.
Lots to unpack there for sure. Okay, let's shift focus a bit. We've got to talk about what's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. Things are escalating there. The Rwanda-backed M23 rebels, they've gone and captured Goma, a major regional capital, and the international community is not happy about it. Can you give us some background on who the M23 are and what they're after?
Right, so the M23, or the March 23 movement, if you want the full name, they're just one of over 100 armed groups causing trouble in the eastern DRC. It's a mess over there. Their roots go back to this peace agreement from 2009. It was supposed to integrate Tutsi fighters into the Congolese army, but the M23 says the government didn't hold up their end of the bargain, so they rebelled. They mainly represent the Congolese Tutsis, who are a minority in that region.
So you've got ethnic tensions, regional power struggles, and historical grievances all mixed up together. Not a simple situation at all.
Not at all. And to make things even more complicated, you've got Rwanda, the neighboring country, allegedly supporting the M23 as a whole other layer of rivalry to the mix. It's volatile, to say the least. And the history there, it's long and bloody.
Definitely not something you can sum up in a few sentences. It sounds incredibly challenging for the people living through it and for those of us trying to understand it from afar.
It is, yeah. For those prepping for the UPSC, though, it's essential to know who the main players are, the historical context, and what's really driving this conflict. And don't forget the regional dynamics and how external forces are playing into it. It's all connected.
All right, let's turn to something a bit more hopeful, something that could actually change the game for conservation. We're talking about a breakthrough in protecting a group of animals that are, well, pretty unique and often overlooked marsupials.
This is exciting, right? Scientists have managed to do something incredible. They've produced kangaroo embryos using in vitro fertilization, IVF. It's a first for marsupials, and it opens up all sorts of possibilities for protecting these amazing creatures.
I have to admit, I don't really know much about how marsupials reproduce. Could you give us a quick rundown?
Yeah.
And why is this IVF thing such a big deal for their conservation?
Sure. So marsupials, they're special because their babies are born pretty underdeveloped. They spend the rest of their development time in their mother's pouch. So you can imagine trying to do something like IVF, it's tricky, but they've done it. And that means we might be able to save endangered marsupial species in a whole new way.
So they're basically creating a backup, genetically, right?
Yeah.
Even if their numbers dwindle in the wild, we could still preserve their unique genes.
Exactly. It's like a safety net for their future. This could be a total game changer for marsupial conservation, ensuring that those unique creatures are around for generations to come.
It's amazing what science can do. Gives you hope.
Okay.
Okay, let's bring it back to India. Let's talk about a river that's got both ecological and historical significance, the Daya River in Odisha.
The Daya River. It starts from the Kusabhadra River and flows all the way into Chilika Lake, which is India's biggest coastal lagoon, by the way. It's been in the news lately for two very different reasons.
Yeah, you mentioned something about its connection to the Kalinga War and Emperor Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism. But there's something else, something more recent, right?
Right. So the annual bird count at the Pongdam Lake Wildlife Sanctuary, which gets its water from the Daya River, they've seen a huge jump in the number of waterfowl. It's a good sign, means the ecosystem is doing well. But yeah, let's talk about the history. The Daya River's got a deep connection to the Kalinga War, a major turning point in Indian history. Happened back in 261 BCE. It was a brutal war, Emperor Ashoka versus the Kalinga kingdom. Legend has it that after the battle, the Daya River was literally flowing with the blood of the soldiers who died.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Uh-huh.
So what happened to Ashoka after seeing that?
Well, that sight, it's said to have changed him completely. He was horrified by the bloodshed and decided to give up violence, embrace Buddhism. He became a huge advocate for peace and nonviolence, spread those ideas throughout his empire.
So the Daya River, in a way, became a symbol of the horrors of war and the power of compassion to change a person's heart. Pretty incredible.
It is. It shows how everything's connected. History, ecology, human values. It all comes together.
It's amazing how something like a river can hold so much meaning. Okay, one more topic before we wrap up this segment. And it's another one about creating a more just society. Let's talk about the National Commission for Safai Karamcharis, the NCSK.
Yeah, the Union Cabinet just extended their term for another 3 years. That says a lot about how important their work is.
Yeah.
They're there to protect the rights and well-being of Safai Karamcharis, the people who keep our sanitation systems running.
Right, and it's not always easy work. They're advocating for a community that often gets ignored, forgotten. It takes dedication.
Absolutely. They're investigating working conditions, suggesting new programs to help, and making sure that the law is actually being enforced, especially when it comes to manual scavenging. That's a practice that should have been abolished ages ago, but it still exists in some places. It's dangerous, dehumanizing. The NCSK's work is crucial to ending it for good.
Totally agree. Now let's move on to a program that really caught my attention. It's about empowering women, and it's got a really smart, targeted approach. The Swavalambini Programme.
Ah, yes, that's the one run by the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship together with NINI Ayog. They're focusing specifically on female students at universities and colleges in Assam, Meghalaya, and Mizoram.
And it's not just about giving them money, right? It's about giving them the tools and support they need to become successful entrepreneurs. Can you tell us more about how the program works and what kind of impact it could have?
Sure. So the Swavalambini program, it's got a multi-layered approach. First, there's this entrepreneurship awareness program. They call it EAP. It's like a foundation course for 600 students, introducing them to the basics of entrepreneurship. Then they pick 300 of those students to move on to the Women Entrepreneurship Development Program, or EDP. That's where they get the really intense training covering all the essentials, finance, marketing, legal stuff, the whole works.
So it's like building blocks, right? Solid foundation, then practical skills. But what really sets this program apart is what comes after the training, isn't it?
You got it. The mentorship. They don't just throw these women into the deep end. They get 6 months of mentorship, someone to guide them, help them through the challenges of starting and running their own businesses.
It's a much more holistic approach. It's not just about filling a skills gap. It's about creating an environment where these women can actually thrive as entrepreneurs.
Exactly. They're recognizing that giving someone knowledge and skills is just the first step. You need that ongoing support, the networking, the access to resources to really make it work. It's about building an ecosystem.
It's a model that could really make a difference, not just in the Northeast, but anywhere, really.
Definitely. Programs like this, they show what's possible when you really focus on empowering women. It's not just good for them, it's good for the whole economy.
Okay, last but not least, let's revisit a term that's been making headlines, and not for good reasons. The donkey route. It's a stark reminder of the risks that people are willing to take for a better life and the exploitation they face along the way.
Yeah, with all the recent deportations, Indians being sent back from the U.S. after trying to get in illegally through this route, it's been a wake-up call for a lot of people.
The term itself comes from a Punjabi idiom, right? It basically means a long, unplanned, and really tough journey. But when you're talking about illegal migration, it takes on a whole other meaning.
For sure. We're talking about dangerous border crossings, relying on fake documents, putting your life in the hands of smugglers and traffickers who are just out to exploit you. It's a desperate gamble, and it often ends tragically.
You mentioned earlier about people getting a Schengen area visa to travel freely across Europe and then trying to sneak into the UK from there.
Yeah.
It just shows how complex this issue is, how desperate people are.
It does. The donkey route. It's a symptom of a bigger problem. A problem that needs real solutions, not just crackdowns and deportations. We need to address the root causes, the things that are driving people to risk everything in the first place.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Yeah.
But it's a conversation we need to keep having.
Okay.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this segment. We've gone from geopolitical hotspots to scientific breakthroughs to social programs. It's amazing how diverse the news can be, right? It really is. It just goes to show you there's always something new to learn, something happening somewhere in the world. Speaking of big happenings, we can't wrap up without talking about Tropex 25, that massive naval exercise the Indian Navy's got going on.
Yeah.
It's a real display of their power and coordination, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's not just for show either. Tropex 25 sends a clear message about India's naval capabilities, their commitment to being a major player in the Indian Ocean region.
And the scale of it, it's pretty mind-blowing, right? You were talking about the Vikrant, their homegrown aircraft carrier. Then you've got destroyers, submarines, fighter jets, those maritime patrol aircraft, helicopters, even drones. It's a lot.
What's the big takeaway here, strategically speaking, especially for our UPSC folks?
Well, Tropex 25 really highlights India's growing military strength, their ability to operate in a complex environment like the Indian Ocean. It emphasizes how important it is for different parts of the military to work together seamlessly. Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, everyone. That's how you tackle the kind of challenges we face today.
Yeah. So it's not just about the hardware, the cool ships and planes. It's about strategy, about being ready for anything.
Exactly. It's about showing the world that India is a force to be reckoned with. And for anyone prepping for the UPSC, understanding all of this, India's military capabilities, their strategic alliances, their role in keeping things stable in the region, it's crucial stuff. All right, let's shift gears one last time. Back to India, to a river that's been in the news for two very different reasons. The Daya River in Odisha. On one hand, we're seeing this amazing increase in the number of waterfowl there, which means the ecosystem is thriving.
Yeah.
But it's also a river with a deep, deep connection to history, right?
Yeah, the Daya River. It starts from the Kusapadra River and flows all the way to Chilikal Lake, which is, India's largest coastal lagoon.
Right.
It's a place where ecology, history, human values, it all intersects. It's pretty remarkable.
It's amazing how a single geographical feature can hold so much significance. Can you tell us more about the Daya River's historical connection?
Well, the Daya River is inseparable from the Kalinga War, a turning point in Indian history. Back in 261 BCE, it was a brutal, bloody conflict between Emperor Ashoka and the Kalinga kingdom. The legend goes that after the battle, the Daya River was flowing red with the blood of the soldiers who died there.
That's a haunting image, a powerful one.
Yeah.
So what impact did this have on Ashoka?
Seeing that carnage, that river of blood, it's said to have completely transformed him. He was overcome with remorse, and he decided right then and there to renounce violence and embrace Buddhism. From that point on, he became this champion of peace and nonviolence, spreading those principles throughout his empire.
So the Daya River, in a way, became a symbol of the horrors of war, but also the incredible power of compassion to change someone, to change history. It's a story that stays with you.
It is. It reminds us that history isn't just a bunch of dates and names. It's a way for us to understand how ideas, values, whole societies evolve. It's a story that's still unfolding even today.
Absolutely. Okay, our last stop on today's deep dive takes us to the world of science, to a discovery that could be a real game changer for conservation. We're talking about marsupials, those adorable creatures with pouches. And scientists have achieved something incredible with them, right?
They have. They've successfully produced kangaroo embryos using in vitro fertilization, or IVF. It's a major breakthrough for marsupial conservation, a world first.
Now, I know IVF is a pretty common thing for humans, but for marsupials, this is huge, right? Can you explain why it's such a big deal?
Well, you see, marsupials, they have a unique way of reproducing. Their babies are born super tiny and underdeveloped, and then they finish growing in their mother's pouch. So to do something like IVF with them, it's incredibly complex. But they've cracked the code, and this opens up a whole new world of possibilities for protecting these animals.
So what you're saying is even if populations dwindle in the wild, scientists could essentially create a genetic backup, preserve their diversity for future generations.
That's exactly it. It's a safety net, a way to ensure that those unique species, even the ones facing threats from habitat loss or climate change, have a fighting chance. It's pretty inspiring, you know?
It really is. Science at its best. And with that, folks, we come to the end of our deep dive into the top current affairs for February 9th, 2025. We've covered a lot of ground today, everything from global conflicts to scientific breakthroughs, social programs, even ancient history. And it's all connected, every single piece of it.
It's all part of the world we live in, shaping the future in one way or another.
And for those of you prepping for the UPSC, remember, knowledge is power. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be. So stay curious, keep learning, and keep exploring the world around you.
And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this deep dive with your fellow aspirants. Let's conquer those exams together.
That's it for today, folks. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.